How's everyone doing today? I hope everyone had a good weekend. Sorry I couldn't make it on Monday. It was pretty insane over here on Monday. I couldn't make it happen, but hopefully I'll make up for it today. One quick announcement that I wanted to say is there has been a little bit of talk on the AP test. It seems that on April 3rd, the AP test is going to be revealed to us as far as the new format. It seems like it's going to be something that you can do on your phone, or probably your phone, but maybe laptop. And I'm hearing all kinds of different stuff from multiple choice to just purely SAQs. I think at this point, and cross fingers, LEQs and DBQs, I believe, are going to be out. I can't see how you could do that on your phone, but we'll see on April 3rd. There's also some talk about there maybe being some content restrictions, and we'll see how that plays out. That'll give us less content to focus on when we begin to review. I'm looking at it like I'm going to finish the story here. I'm going to keep going. We're going to do the Cold War, finish all that out. And then once we get an idea of what the test is going to be and what week that's going to be, then we'll start to get into review mode, and I'll start posting some review stuff, both video, audio, and some different packet stuff to work on, to get ready. As far as today goes, what we're going to try to do is finish up the war today, and then tomorrow we'll do, treaties and conferences, the Holocaust, and just, wrap it up. But I hope to get through the Pacific today and kind of end the conflict that is World War II. So we'll see how far we get. Also, I appreciate all the people that are watching. I was a little disheartened on the Google Classroom, and then my wife showed me how to check my YouTube views. And we're looking at 30, and a lecture, so very happy to see that. I appreciate it. So starting out today, I've got my clicker. We are going to wrap up the European theater and just kind of end out Europe and then transition over to the Pacific. Now, when we last left off in Europe, I had mentioned that, the war had come to an end, VE Day, Hitler's dead, the European war is over. And yay, big win for us and the British and the French and the Soviets, it's all a great victory. We are going to see a couple leaders leave us after the European war comes to an end. One is Winston Churchill. He's going to be replaced by this guy, Clement Attlee. Like I said, Churchill, there's a lot of great things about Winston Churchill. There's a lot of bad things about Winston Churchill. And the British people do not feel that Winston Churchill is like a peacetime leader. And I somewhat agree with that. So he is not going to win re-election. Clement Attlee, who's a socialist, is going to win re-election. And we'll talk about Clement Attlee later, so don't make sure that, don't frantically try to get his name down. And he's gonna lead England into a welfare state type situation, which we'll spend some time with. Now, because we're essentially saying goodbye to Winston Churchill, I'm going to bring him up again a little bit later on. I want to give you my last Winston Churchill story. When we first talked about Winston Churchill back in the good old days when we were in the classroom, at least for me, and I had mentioned that he had dinner with this woman in Washington, D.C. Well, towards the end of the war, he's going to have dinner with her again. And I don't even know if Winston Churchill remembered this woman at all. But they sit down again, and this woman certainly remembers Churchill, and he's smoking and drinking his brandy, and he's doing his same old thing. And they serve the soup. And apparently, Churchill's a bit of a slurper, so he's slurping up his soup here. And it's, this woman already hates him, and, here he is slurping his soup, and she turns over to him and she says, "Mr. Churchill, if you were my husband, I would poison that soup." And Churchill puts his spoon down and he goes, "Madam, if you were my wife, I would eat it." Which is such a great line from Churchill. Now, like I was saying, Churchill is going to exit stage right here. And another guy that we're going to lose is, I had the wrong picture up there. Sorry, there's Clement Attlee. All right. Another guy we're going to lose is Franklin Roosevelt. And he's going to be replaced by this guy, Harry Truman. Now, where Churchill is voted out, Roosevelt will pass away in office. Roosevelt had been sick for some time. He really had hoped to, make it through the European War, and he pretty much did. But he will not see the end of the Pacific War. He will die in Warm Springs, Georgia, and he will be replaced by his vice president, Harry Truman. Now, Harry Truman is a very different man than Roosevelt. Harry Truman is the last man to become president of the United States without a college degree. And he can tend to be pretty blunt and also a bit of a political animal. People used to call him Give 'em Hell Harry because he would, certainly tell you how it is. Now, Harry Truman will be the guy that will finish out the war in the Pacific for us. And he will be the guy that will have to make the very difficult decision of dropping the atomic bomb, which we will get into. Now, heading back to the Pacific, there's Clement Attlee again. Heading back to the Pacific, MacArthur was the guy that was heading out the Pacific Ocean there for us. And MacArthur is now in Australia commanding this war, and he's looking for an opportunity to kind of change the tide in the Pacific. Now, up until this point, we've had the Doolittle Raid, and the Doolittle Raid was the strategic bombing of Tokyo there to kind of get a little retaliation for Pearl Harbor. But as great as that makes us feel, that doesn't really do a lot to equal up the Pacific. We're still down carriers and battleships and airplanes, and the Japanese fleet that has pushed back a little bit is still the dominant fleet in the Pacific Ocean, and they're now, after taking Wake Island, beginning to move on their next target, and that is Midway Island. Now, if you remember, and you probably don't, but when we first did the Pacific War, I had mentioned that the Japanese battle plan was to take Wake, Midway Island, the Hawaiian Islands, and then on to the California coastline, invade the United States, and move in. And if they had been able to do that in December of 41, January of 42, we could not stop the Japanese armed forces until they hit Detroit. Now, they were not ready to do that, but if they had been, we would have been in a lot of trouble. Now, the Japanese believe that our strong resistance is going to be Hawaii. They think when they try to occupy Hawaii, that's going to be savage. But they think that Midway is going to be fairly easy to take. For this reason, we decide that we're going to make our stand in Midway. Try to catch the Japanese off guard. Now, the guy that's put in charge of this operation is a man named Chester Nimitz. He's going to be in charge of the Navy, and this is going to be primarily a naval battle here in Midway. So he's going to command this operation. And what Chester Nimitz is going to do is he's going to take one American aircraft carrier, the USS Yorktown. He's going to put that out in front of Midway with a little cruiser escort a couple ships. Show the Japanese what they want to see. One carrier, a small defense of the island. That's exactly what they expect. Meanwhile, on Midway, we have planes. Behind Midway, we have an additional 4 aircraft carriers and about 20 other battleships, destroyers, other ships back there. Now, the thought was when the Japanese come in with their whole fleet, 5 aircraft carriers, over 100 cruisers, destroyers, battleships, that we'll get them to focus on the Yorktown and then attack their ships from our reserve force. So the idea is the Yorktown is put with extra fire crews. They know they're going to get it good. All of those Japanese carriers, planes are going to go towards the Yorktown. They're going to try to sink the Yorktown. Here is the Yorktown. Now, while those Japanese planes are away, we're going to hit their 5 carriers with everything that we've got to try to take them out. Now, the plan works well. While the Japanese airplanes are away messing with the Yorktown, we are killing these carriers from the sky. Here's an American dive bomber coming down on the Akagi. And here's the Soryu going down. When it's all said and done, we will take down 3 Japanese aircraft carriers, which is a devastating turn of events for the Japanese. This is the Yorktown ablaze. Amazingly enough, American crews are able to put out the fire on the Yorktown. However, after the battle is all over and we've won it, a Japanese sub sneaks up, hits the Yorktown with a torpedo, and takes it down. So it will actually not survive the battle, but the casualties are relatively low on the Yorktown. Also, there is a replica, almost a perfect replica, of the Yorktown in Charleston. It is obviously not the real boat, but it's the exact same thing, you know. So if you ever get a chance to get up to Charleston, it'd be a cool thing to check out. Now, the important thing about Midway is the Battle of the Midway is the Stalingrad of the Pacific. It's the turning point of the Pacific War. It's when everything starts to shift in our favor on a practical level. You know, we could say the emotional level is the Doolittle raid, but on a practical level, it's Midway. So just know that Midway is the turning point of the Pacific War, and you'll be good with Midway. Oh, also, man, you're just missing the boat, but brand new movie just came out like literally months ago called Midway. You should check it out. It's fantastic. You know, I'm not sure if you're watching any of these movies, but if you're someone who does find history interesting, you know, I'm not picking out, you know, boring slop history documentaries like I would watch. I'm throwing out, like, you know, really good movies with good plots, and you'll enjoy them. So, you know, Midway is one you should check out. Now, after Midway, our next important battle is going to be known as the Battle of Guadalcanal. And with the Battle of Guadalcanal, we're going to see that we've got 2 different modes of operation here. Chester Nimitz is going to primarily be operating the Navy out of Hawaii and heading towards the island of Japan itself. MacArthur is going to be focusing in the South Pacific, in the general Australian area, with the goal of retaking the Philippines and then on to the Pacific. I'm sorry, on to Japan. So you know, these are 2 different battle plans that are going on at the same time, mainly the Army and the Navy doing their own thing. Now, in Guadalcanal, what we're going to have is an island that sits off the coast of Australia. And the Japanese control this island, and they have begun to build an airfield on the island with the purpose of bombing American supply ships to Australia. You know, if you end up taking Henderson's World War II class, he'll talk about the Australians. They fight like animals, boy, and they never go down to the Japanese. And one of the reasons is we're supplying them from Hawaii, and the Japanese want to stop that. Now, we cannot allow that to happen. So we are going to attack this island, and we are going to stop this airfield from becoming operational. This puts us in a situation where now we're doing the amphibious assault. Now we're going from water to land, which is always a difficult operation to conduct. Now at Guadalcanal, the fighting is going to be savage, and I'm going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about Pacific warfare in general. You know, if I had to go back in time and someone was like, hey, Whiter, you can fight in Europe or you can fight in the Pacific, I would take Europe any day of the week. I wouldn't even think about it. Now, don't get me wrong, you're fighting the Nazis, okay? And these are far from, you know, the purest warriors in, you know, the history of armies. However, for the most part, unless you're Jewish, the Nazis do follow, or Russian, mind you, the Nazis do follow the general rules of warfare. So, you know, if you get captured and you throw your hands up, chances are you're going to go to a prison, you're going to be fed a little bit, and you probably survive if you don't do anything stupid. Like, you're not going to a concentration camp. They didn't take American POWs to concentration camps. That's not how it worked. Now, there's incidents, obviously, and, you know, there's always incidents. You know, there's one famous guy named Pfeiffer, who is going to slaughter a whole bunch of American soldiers. You know, he's an SS Panzer commander. So you got examples in Europe. But in the Pacific, it's pretty much standard procedure. So in the Pacific, anything goes in Pacific fighting. Just to give you some examples, like the Japanese were classic for like throwing up the white flag. and then Americans would like come up to the position, and then the Japanese that were left would have like grenades strapped behind their backs and just start chucking grenades down and just shooting as many Americans as they could with the white flag up, which you just do not see that kind of stuff in Europe often, and this would be standard procedure in the Pacific. They would also do stuff like, you know, grab local people, especially children. I have to keep my voice down a little bit because my daughters get very disturbed by my lectures. But they would grab little kids, and then, you know, they would put like grenades in their pants, and then like punch them in the face, and then push them out into the street. And the little kid would go running down the street crying, you know, bloody, and then American would come up and be like, oh, hey, little girl, and go pick up the kid, and then the grenades would fall out, and boom, you know. This kind of stuff would be just, like I said, commonplace in the Pacific. And, you know, lots of stuff in that regard. And just to, you know, slam my point home, there was a very famous story in the 1970s, some island in the Pacific, I can't remember what one it was. There's a Japanese soldier that's like still fighting the war in like 1971 or something like that. And he's like killed a couple people that have gone into this area of the jungle. So, you know, the Filipinos go in there, or whatever island it was, and they go in there and they say, like, listen, dude, the war's over. Like, you need to come out. And he won't listen to anyone, you know. So they bring his family out there. They go, the war's over, you know, whatever the guy's name is, Kairu. And, you know, the war's over, you know, come on out. And he's like, no, I won't do it. You know, I want to talk to my commanding officer. So they dig this guy's commanding officer up. I mean, this guy's super old. They bring him out there. They're like, you know, they tell him, like, listen, you know, it's over. I command you to get out. So the guy comes out. And afterwards, they do a debriefing, you know, and they're like, you know, listen, you know, like, when we told you the war was over and we brought your family out there, why didn't you believe us? And the guy goes, I thought it was a trick. If we had lost the war, there wouldn't be a Japanese person alive. I thought that, you know, there had to be some kind of a trick. How could we ever surrender? How could that ever happen? You know, and that shows you that mindset where, like, he thought, like, well, if we lost, everyone's got to be dead. You know, how's it possible? So, you know, it's a whole different mindset of fighting. And if you talk to an American in the Pacific, they'll tell you, like, we did not take prisoners. You know, very few prisoners taken in the Pacific. Someone pulls the white flag trick on you one time, that's it. You know, so it's pretty much to the death in the Pacific, and it's anything goes. So it's some rough fighting, and we'll see here at Guadalcanal. This is the beach at Guadalcanal. So here's you can see all these dead Americans as we try to get out of the surf. Now, when we get onto the island, we quickly cover the island, take control of it, get the airstrip, through some pretty savage jungle fighting, and when that happens, you know, you have to do some cleanup operations. So you send some people into the jungle and, you know, find the, you know, Japanese guy that's running around in there and shoot him. So we sent some guys into the jungle, you know, a little cleanup operation, and, you know, they come back and we're missing 3 dudes. So we go in and we try to find these guys. We can't find them. It's getting dark, so we're like, oh, we'll look tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning comes, and we go in and look, and we find them. They've been skinned, hanging from trees. Now, we can't find any Japanese guys anywhere on this island at all. Now, that evening, we're missing 2 more guys. Can't find them anywhere. Next morning, we go into the jungle, and skinned, hanging from trees. Well, this time, we do some night patrols, and there's an American sitting up against a tree having a cigarette, and he sees the ground start to move. He moves behind the tree, and he sees 2 Japanese soldiers crawl out from the ground. And what we begin to realize is that they have tunneled under the entire island of Japan. And they're operating as like a base down there. They're like pulling Americans down, torturing them, skinning them, bringing them back up, and, you know, hey, what do you think of that? Now, you know, this is telling for 2 reasons. You know, first off, if they're doing this at Guadalcanal, some garbage island in the South Pacific, imagine what they're doing in Japan, like the homeland, if they're willing to do this. Secondly, is how do you get them out of there? You know, no one's really looking to do that. go down in those holes. For instance, I imagine most of you have seen Forrest Gump, and you probably remember the scene where Lieutenant Dan throws a grenade into the hole, and he goes, "Gump, check out that hole." And then Gump takes 2 guns and jumps in. Well, there's a reason they asked Forrest Gump to do that, and I think we know what it is. All right, people ain't looking to do it. So this is where you got like the United States Marine Corps, boy. They take these big oceanic pumps, and they hook one pump up to the Pacific Ocean, and then they hook the other pump up to the hole, and they start pumping the water out of the Pacific down into the hole. And what happens is the Japanese begin to come up, and when they do that, you just shoot them. Or take some of them prisoner. We did take some of them prisoner, but it's basically shoot the Japanese as they come up, and eventually we'll clean out Guadalcanal. But I mean, that's the situation that you're dealing with. Now, the next area in the Pacific I want to talk about is the moving in on the Philippine Islands themselves. And one important battle to do that is the Battle of Saipan. This is considered to be the gateway to the Philippine Islands. Here's our soldiers trying to take Saipan. Here's an amphibious assault. You can see a couple of our guys have already been hit by Japanese snipers. There's us advancing across the island. Now, once Saipan is taken, the gateway to the Philippines is really open. And I told you, we shall return. MacArthur is on his way back, and he is bringing the noise, boy. When we come back to the Philippines, it's a much different force than we left with. Massive naval and air support. And the Japanese are trying to get out of the Philippines to get back to Japan to defend the home island. So, it's going to be a pretty much a crushing victory for us in the Philippines. Now, I want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the situation with our guys in the Philippines. This is a POW camp in the Philippines. I want you to take a look at the drawings of these skeleton-like figures. Also, you probably can't see it, but over here it says 1942. All right, we're liberating these guys in late 44, early 45. You can see these poop buckets. That's where they go to the bathroom. I told you in earlier lectures about some of the tortures these poor guys went through. Here's a picture of them, the guys that we're able to save. Now, it's not only our guys that are suffering, it's also the Filipino people. If you're just looking at this picture right here, all right, if you look at this girl, you can gauge on the age, I'd say 9, 10 years old. All right, look at these bruises all over the body. All right, this girl's been raped multiple times by Japanese soldiers. If you look at this guy over here, okay, and then if you look down in this corner, you can see that right there. That's a bayonet wound. All right, why you need to bayonet an 11-year-old, I don't know. He must have been some great threat to the Japanese armed forces. I'm sure they were very concerned about him. So this is the kind of brutality that's going on in the Philippines. Needless to say, the Filipino people are very happy when we show up to liberate them. We feel very bad about what happened in the Philippines. There wasn't a ton we could have done there, but there are things we could have done, and we failed. And as we're sorry type gesture, we are going to grant the Philippines their independence after World War II. The Philippines are an independent nation today. So I'm not sure if that makes up for what happened there, but we tried. The one last thing I want to talk about with the Philippines, and we'll move on, is in the capital of the Philippines, Manila. We had some pretty horrible situations there. We began to surround Manila, and we were going to come in and an encirclement and take the Japanese out there. And while we were surrounding them, the Japanese were just brutalizing the local population. They were just taking women out to the beach and just raping them and shooting them on the beach. And our guys had moved around the jungle perimeters, so we could see them doing it. But we were given strict orders to not engage until we had fully encircled them, not to tip the Japanese off into what was going to happen there. So we decided to watch it go down. And I had read a couple of guys, that had seen this, said that they had never felt the hatred towards people that they felt for the Japanese at Manila. That, you know, as soon as they got an opportunity to go into that city, there was no quarter. You know, like if there's some Japanese in a basement, we're just chucking gasoline down there and lighting it. I mean, it's savage, boy. I have to admit, you know, I mean, those kinds of atrocities, you know, if you're doing that and people are watching you do it, then there's a level of rage that's going to be built up that, you know, you reap what you sow. I know I've said that before, but, you know, it is the truth. And the Japanese are going to pay for it here in Manila, boy. We're not going to take many prisoners there when we roll in. With the Philippines taken, we're now starting to move on to the home island itself, Japan itself. And this is going to be our last battle that we're going to talk about in the Pacific War, and that's the Battle of Iwo Jima. And Iwo Jima is a famous battle because it is the first island that we're able to launch bombers off of to hit Japan itself. So now we can really start to lay into the Japanese with some bombing attacks. Also, this is home Japanese territory, so they're going to fight for this more ferociously than some of these other lands. This is traditional Japanese land. One of the defining features of Iwo Jima is Mount Suribachi here. It's a dormant volcano that the Japanese will turn into a natural castle. They tunnel all into this. They put guns up in there, artillery pieces, and they make that like a fortress. Now, the hope of the Japanese was to kill 1 million Americans at Iwo Jima. Now, they're not going to get anywhere near that, but it's going to be some nasty fighting. We're going to lose about 54,000 Americans at Iwo Jima. And one of the things that they do at Iwo, which totally catches us by surprise, is most times the most difficult part of an amphibious assault is going from water to land. You know, trying to get out of the water onto the beach. It's difficult. The Japanese at Iwo are going to let us hit the beach. So, you know, first wave hits, no resistance. Second wave hits, no resistance. Third wave hits, no resistance. And, you know, at that point we're starting to think, like, what are they? Did they abandon the island? You know, what's happened here? And when that third wave gets on there, now you got all these Americans packed on the beach. Then the Japanese just unload from Mount Suribachi and concealed machine gun positions all over the beach. And when that happens, we take massive, massive casualties on that beach. You know, the tactic switch really caught us off guard there. And we felt it, boy, in those opening hours at Iwo Jima. Now, that being said, we will advance in towards the island and get closer towards Mount Suribachi. It's tough fighting. You know, it's a volcanic island, so you have sand and volcanic rock, and there's not good places to dig in. It's about Christmas time, you know, that this is happening, and Americans are depressed. You know, it's just been hard, savage fighting. The Japanese are just trying to take every last man with them. And as we get around Mount Suribachi, morale is pretty low. So, an American Marine commander has the idea of having a group of 5 guys run up the side of Mount Suribachi and put an American flag on the top. He feels that when we see the flag at the top, that this will be, you know, inspiring for all the guys below, and this will be a great moment. And that 5 guys, because the force is so small, they should be able to get around the defenses. So these 5 guys run up, slam a flag into the ground, and sure enough, the reaction below by the soldiers is very powerful. People are weeping and cheering and singing the national anthem, and it's a really powerful moment. So powerful that the Marine commander's like, man, it's going to be a super famous flag. So he grabs another 5 guys and he says, listen, I need you to go up. I need you to take that flag down. I want you to put this bigger flag up and bring that flag back to me. That's mine. All right, so I'll take the smaller one. You put this bigger one up. So he sends this next 5 guys up. And they're up there and they're putting up the next flag. And we get this picture. Now, mind you, this is the second flag raising at Iwo Jima, all right? The photographer that snaps this picture did not think he got it. There's a whole bunch of pictures of these guys at the top of Iwo Jima, and a lot of them are just like this, you know, and they're holding the flag, like posing, you know, there's tons of them. and he was changing the film on his camera. And he noticed that they were lifting the flag up, so he slammed the camera shut and took the photo, and he turned to him and he goes, "Sorry, boys, I missed it." So he thought he missed the shot. Now, it's not like today, they have to develop the film, so the film comes back to the United States, and this picture comes out, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that that's a powerful image, boy. That shows up in every American newspaper, and there was points where they had these guys come back. These 4 guys come back and restage the whole thing, go up a hill in Yankee Stadium and put the flag in the ground just so we could watch them. That's what a crazy experience this thing ended up being. Now, the cynics say, well, it was posed. The photographer said, you stand here, you stand here. Everyone there says that is not the case. All right, the photographer said, I am not that good of a photographer. I could not have set this picture up if I wanted to. So this is a natural moment that we're catching here, which is, in my opinion, more powerful than if we had staged all of this. So anyways, this is a very famous picture. I'm sure you've probably seen it before, and it happens at Iwo Jima. Shortly after this picture is taken, we will take Iwo Jima, and now the gateway to Japan is open. Although there will still be savage fighting in Okinawa and some of the surrounding islands of Japan, at this point in time, the Japanese are pretty much done. Short of Martians landing, they're not turning this war around. The noose is closing now. And it's at this moment that the Japanese turn to last-ditch tactics, which is kamikaze fighting. Kamikaze means divine wind or suicide pilots. You're basically putting young men from 14 to 17 typically into airplanes, and they're flying their airplanes into American ships trying to blow them up. One of the reasons they're doing this is we bombed out a lot of their bomb factories, and they've got excess planes but not a lot of bombs. And another reason is it's almost like a guided missile. It can cause more damage if you can make the impact. Now, this is actually a pretty rare photo of a kamikaze attack. You can see the plane coming in here and it's about to smash into the boat. Here's some Japanese kamikaze pilots. They would tell these guys that, you're going to be remembered as samurai and your family will be remembered for all time, and they would, get these guys all hopped up on nationalism. They would teach them how to take off, how to fly. They won't teach you how to land. You don't have to worry about it. You ain't coming back. They also disengaged their injector seats on the airplanes. They didn't tell them that, but there's no ejecting. And then finally, they gave them some sake laced with opium before you would take off to get you feeling all kind of messed up, to go into this attack. But to be honest, most of these guys didn't need the sake. They're ready, they're ready to sacrifice their life for their country. In fact, there's, a couple of famous stories about the Japanese had a torpedo, which I can't even get my mind around this. Torpedo where there's a person inside of the torpedo. And you're fired in the torpedo, and then you're steering the torpedo towards the boat. And then you smash into the boat and blow up. And if you don't smash, then you just go to the bottom of the ocean and then just drown down there. And there are stories of Japanese fighting over who gets to be the person in the torpedo. And you hear those stories and you're I can't even, that is so far from my mental state that it's hard for me to comprehend. So, a lot of these guys are willing to do it. That being said, it's not going to have that big of an impact. Most of these Japanese kamikazes are shot out of the sky before they're ever even able to hit an American boat. So it's dealt with pretty quickly. Now, some destroyers do get taken down. Some ships do go down. It does happen, but overall, it's not going to change the game. And, it's at this point that Japanese resistance is really starting to amp up to almost a psychotic level. They want to surrender, but with all these conditions, and we basically told them, hey, if you surrender, there's no conditions, okay? You just give it up. All right, it's over. Hey, Al, you want to come say hi to my class? You want to say hi to my class?
Do you want to say hi to his class?
Okay. All right. So, like I was saying, the resistance is going to get pretty savage here. And you cannot say hi. You don't have any pants on. All right, you need to keep moving.
Come on.
All right. So, like I was saying, Japanese resistance is getting pretty fanatical. They're telling the Japanese people in the newspapers that, when we land, that it's going to be, rape, murder, pillage, we're going to do all this crazy stuff to them. That, our cuisine was eating Japanese people, you name it. They're telling all these people these crazy, crazy stories. And in fact, and I need to act this out because my daughters are near here, but Japanese women were so convinced that we were going to consume them, all right, and their children, that we have video of them walking up to cliffs with their baby and going, and then jumping off themselves. And we're like begging them, like, please don't do that, and just one after another. So, the fanatical nature that exists there is extreme. It's at this point that we're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going to talk about the atomic bomb, and that's where I'm going to end out today, okay? The atomic bomb is going to begin with this guy right here, Albert Einstein. He would hate me saying that, but that is where it's going to begin. And Albert Einstein had been working on some theories on splitting an atom before World War II ever happened. He's a Jewish scientist in Austria, and some of his science buddies have been working on splitting an atom. And the reason why was not a bomb, but a nuclear power plant. They thought, like, if we could split atoms, we could release all this energy and we could power cities cleanly. And it was all just theory. Now, when Hitler takes power, Einstein has to flee. He comes here. He's living in New Jersey. And early off in the war, 42, he gets a letter from a German scientist, one of his buddies, saying, Hitler's got us doing some work with atomic theory, and he's got us working on putting this into a bomb format. And I don't need to tell you what kind of weapon we'll be talking about in that situation. Now, when Einstein reads this, he debates on whether or not to tell Roosevelt this, because if he tells Roosevelt, the first thing Roosevelt's going to do is he is going to build that bomb. And Einstein's a pacifist. He does not want that bomb to be built, so he doesn't want to do it. However, he thinks about the idea of Hitler having the bomb. He can't let that happen. So he goes to Roosevelt and says, listen, this is what the Germans are working on. This is what I think you can do. I just want to give you a heads up. Roosevelt, when he hears it, he's like, all right, we got to get moving on this thing now. We got to start constructing this thing. And Einstein goes, I'm not building this bomb. Okay, you got a lot of brilliant scientists in this country. I ain't doing it. I hate that I'm even talking to you about it. I ain't building it. That's the last thing Einstein has to do with this, okay? He's not going to work on it. He's not going to build it. He does tell Roosevelt about it. And, he's still, he considered it the worst thing he'd ever done. In his autobiography, he said that if he had taken one thing back in his life, it would have been talking to Roosevelt. Because Hitler doesn't get the bomb. And we're the only ones that ever used it. So if we didn't have it, maybe no one would ever have it. That's probably not true, but I get where he's coming from. Now, when we start working on the atomic bomb, it's going to be codenamed the Manhattan Project. Now, that is because the project starts in Manhattan at Columbia University, but it don't spend much time there. It's mainly in some facilities in New Mexico and also some facilities in Iowa, where a lot of this is being done. Los Alamos is probably one of the most famous facilities, but there's a lot of different places where it's being done. Now, in this kind of a research, it's so classified that if you're at Los Alamos, okay, and your mother passes away, you ain't allowed to leave. Everything you need is on that base. Okay, movie theaters, grocery stores, everything you need, your house, all that stuff's there. But there's no leaving. So it was all very, very secretive, all very, very classified. Eventually, we are going to split an atom. That is the reactor where we're going to split an atom. First atom to be split. And just like Einstein thought, boy, when we split that atom, it released a lot of energy. Now, at this point, our next thing to do here is to try to turn that into a bomb format. By 1945, we have got a bomb version of this atomic reaction. And this is when Harry Truman is going to come into play. Now, this project was so secretive that Roosevelt never talked to Truman about it. It was not discussed. And, when Truman becomes president, they're talking about an amphibious assault of Japan. And they're giving him casualties on the American end of maybe 700,000 or 800,000 Americans trying to take this island. We think the Japanese casualties could be in the millions. And we've already lost 450,000 Americans. So, they're giving these numbers to Truman, and Truman's sitting there like, oh my God, we can't lose more than double what we've already lost, we can't do that. And he asked what the other solutions are. And people throw out some other solutions. One is starvation, that we just starve them into submission. Others are, to increase the firebombing that we've done. We've been bombing Japanese cities like crazy. In fact, we had just created a firestorm in Tokyo, which is a huge whirlwind of fire that killed tens of thousands of people just before this. So, we're already doing some pretty nasty stuff to the Japanese before this is even talked about. But at this point, the Secretary of Defense brings up the atomic bomb. Now, Truman has never heard of this before, so he calls in the lead scientist, whose name is Robert Oppenheimer, another German Jew. If Hitler didn't hate Jews so much, things would have maybe gone differently for him. And Oppenheimer comes in, and he starts telling Truman what's going to happen here. Now, mind you, Truman doesn't have a college education. Even if he did, he probably wouldn't understand what Oppenheimer's talking about. And about halfway through, Truman's like, listen, I don't understand anything that you're saying. Let's break this down to an easier level. Worst case scenario, we drop this puppy. What are we dealing with? And Oppenheimer goes, well, we're talking about one of the largest, explosions that we've ever seen before. It's theoretically possible. It ignites all the hydrogen in our atmosphere, sets the entire planet on fire. Truman goes, well, what are the chances of that happening? He goes, well, it's pretty small. I don't think that's going to happen, but, it could happen. 0.0005%, and Truman's like, okay, that is pretty small. What's the least thing that could happen? And he goes, well, Mr. President, it's never been tested, we could drop it out of a plane and thud and nothing, So Truman goes, my extremes are whole world on fire or nothing. And Oppenheimer goes, correct. And Truman goes, well, what do you think's going to happen? And he goes, well, Mr. President, I think everything within a 7 to 8 mile radius is going to be gone. There's people, buildings, everything. And then Truman goes, 0.005% the whole world's going to explode. And he's like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. So Truman goes, okay, well, let's test this thing. So they do. They go out to the desert of New Mexico, and on July 16th, 1945, they're going to detonate the first atomic bomb. Now, we made some mistakes here. You'll see our guys here are very close to the explosion. A lot of these guys are going to get radiation poisoning, and in fact, some of these guys are going to be killed. We did not understand radiation poisoning at the time, and our guys will pay the ultimate price. So that is truly tragic, but it was certainly not intentional, but maybe we could have had the boys back a little bit further than that. The scientists certainly are. And when the bomb explodes and Oppenheimer sees it for the first time, everyone else there is, they're pretty silent. They're just in awestruck of the mushroom cloud and the awesome power of an atomic blast. And Oppenheimer says, "Good Lord, what have I done? I'm the destroyer of worlds." So, here's Oppenheimer looking at it and going, oh my lord, I've created this horrible weapon. I think he fully realizes the weapon that he has designed, and when he sees it, he's horrified at what he's created. He will work the rest of his life to get rid of nuclear weapons, only to fail. He tries to get rid of them, but that Pandora's out of the box, and there's no fixing that. Now, after we test it, we really just have the decision on whether or not to use it. Now, although people debate this decision today, should we have dropped it, should we not have dropped it, I think there's great theories on both ends, books have been written on both ends. To be honest, in the time period, there is no decision. If Americans had known that there was a bomb that if dropped on a Japanese city could have ended the war, and that Truman didn't use it, he would have been impeached. He would have been removed of office 100%. You talk to anyone who lived during that time period, and they would have said, if Truman didn't use the atomic bomb, we would have wanted him gone. So, as far as Americans were concerned, there is no decision. Like, we can look back today, not living through the horrors of Pearl Harbor and World War II and your sons dying overseas. We can look back and go, they shouldn't have done that. It seems a lot of people are going to die here. We can do it like that. But if you're living back then, people were like, oh, drop the bomb. There was no thought. Now, Harry Truman does go through his thought process here. He says that, in the end, he thought, what's the job of the President of the United States? He said, my ultimate job is to protect the lives of American citizens. And I couldn't tell an American mother, sorry, Johnny's going to have to die so that I can save the life of a Japanese civilian. He's like, I can't do that. Also, Truman writes that he believed that the bombs in themselves would save lives through either the fire bombings we're doing, the actual invasion of the island, or starvation. The lowest kill totals, still most people think, was the atomic bomb. Even the two of them. I think he's got some good reasons why. Also, I must add in, we can't take out the personal note here. Hey, if the Japanese had won, had fought a super civil, fairly politically correct war, would we have dropped the atomic bomb? Maybe even in that situation we would have dropped it. But I think we would have thought about it a lot more. Like after Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, the torturing of our guys, I think that most Americans are just like, drop the bomb, Now, when Truman makes the decision, some people get angry. Like, a couple people, in the cabinet stand up and go, Mr. President, I can't be associated with this. I resign my position. And much different than what we see in politics now, Truman stands up and he slams his fist down on the table and he goes, the buck stops here. And he's a card player, and what he means is the betting stops at some point and you got to show your hands. And he says, the betting stops with me. It's my decision. I'm making it. And whether you think Harry Truman should have made the decision or not, I will give Harry Truman one thing. He does not back down from it. After he drops those two bombs and people are like, oh my God, what did you do? He doesn't say, oh, the scientists didn't tell me how bad it was going to be, or the military said this many people wouldn't die. He never does that. He totally takes it on himself. So we've got the decision now. And now we have to pick a target. Now, contrary to popular opinion, the goal here is not to kill as many Japanese people as possible, all right? So we could have just dropped it on Tokyo, but that's not the goal. We're not looking to destroy the capital. However, and I guess pun a little bit intended here, we do need to drop it on a target big enough to make an impression. So you can't drop it on some farm village, So the target that we select is the Japanese city of Hiroshima. Now, I know you probably heard Hiroshima, and that's fine, all right? The Japanese pronounce it Hiroshima, so I'm going to go with that. The reason we picked Hiroshima is it was the city that made the planes that attacked us at Pearl Harbor, so there's a little bit of a payback for that. Also, it's a mid-sized industrial city, so it's a reasonable target for us. Now, the plane that's going to carry the bomb is the Enola Gay. That is Paul Tibbets' mom. Paul Tibbets is the pilot. There's the crew. It's a B-2 bomber. Make sure we're keeping on pace here. This is the bomb that we're going to be dropping. This bomb right here is called Little Boy. And it's going to be dropped on August 6, 1945. So I need you to highlight that. August 6, 1945, we're going to drop the bomb. We're going to drop it in the morning. The crew of the Enola Gay was given 2 specific instructions. Number 1, all right, you are not to look at the blast. We did not know if the light of the blast would blind them. They do have special goggles on, but we didn't know if the blast would be too intense for them. So not supposed to look. Also, when you drop a bomb, you're supposed to circle the target, confirm detonation. We are not going to do that. Once the bomb is dropped, you're out of there as fast as possible. And, we didn't know how high the mushroom cloud would go, and it could destroy the plane. Now, they are going to get out of there as fast as possible, but they're going to look. I mean, how can you not look? They all looked. Now, their reactions are quite different. Some of the people said that, when they saw the bomb, they felt bad. They knew a lot of people were dying down there, and they knew they were responsible, or at least they had dropped the bomb, and, there's some sympathy. Other guys kind of looked at it like, hey, I had a job to do, I did it, I don't think about it, it was war, it is what it is, So there are really different reactions on the Enola Gay and how they felt about it. Now, we had a camera on the back of the Enola Gay. Now, this is the first shot from the camera, which is pretty decent, but the second shot's pretty good. Now, like I said, this mushroom cloud, we were concerned about how it was going to go, and, if you've ever been in an airplane, you know that it takes a little bit to get above the cloud line. And look how high this cloud is above the cloud line. I mean, it's just massive, boy. That shows the power. Now, when an atomic bomb is dropped, I don't want you to think that it hits the ground. It doesn't. When it's dropped, it's detonated, and there's a timing mechanism, and, it's probably like 50 miles from the ground when it detonates, so it doesn't like hit and detonate. It detonates in midair. Here is Hiroshima before we drop the atomic bomb at 7:45 a.m. That's Hiroshima after. So we'll look at this one more time. Hiroshima before, Hiroshima after. Truly devastating. Now here's the blast radius, okay? This goes about 5 miles out. And, believe it or not, the bomb is going to drop right here in the center there. And if you are going to die in an atomic explosion, you actually want to be as close to the bomb as possible, right underneath it. Because when that bomb goes off, we're looking at temperatures of 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which means you're vaporized instantaneously. Maybe you see a light, okay? You're not going to feel anything. It's going to be over super, super fast. However, if you're out here in this orange area, okay, now temperatures fall to about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is where we see, the really bad stuff. In this point, you've got, like, blood boiling underneath the skin, skin melting off. Also, people's clothes were fused into the skin, like your shirt and your arms, like the same thing. And when doctors came rushing in from some of the surrounding villages, the injuries were so grotesque they didn't even know where to begin treating people at that point. So that area is really, really bad. This yellow area is radiation. Radiation causes cancer. So the more intense the radiation, the more horrible the cancer. Some people are going to die from cancer in a couple of months from this radiation. Some people it takes years for people to die. So it really depends on where you are at Hiroshima, to determine what kind of casualties we're going to see there. Now, an interesting thing about Hiroshima is the wind speed at Hiroshima is going to be just something that's hard to get your mind around. Like, just to put it into some comparison, the F5 tornadoes, that's the biggest, baddest tornado you could possibly have. You know, Oklahoma City was hit by an F5 tornado in 2010. And, there's nothing left of the city. It's just completely destroyed. And those have winds of anywhere between 250 and 275 miles an hour. When the bomb is dropped on Hiroshima, we're going to have wind speeds of 950 miles an hour. I mean, that's how you get a situation like this. When it's all said and done, most historians believe that with Hiroshima and then the radiation deaths afterwards, we're looking at about 200,000, maybe as high as 250,000 dead in the Hiroshima blast. Now, even as horrible as this situation is, the Japanese government refuses to surrender. Now, I do have a little bit of an issue with this. Okay, we tell them if they don't surrender, we're going to drop another bomb. All right. They tell us they're not going to surrender. We are going to drop another bomb 3 days later on August 9th, 1945. I personally feel like we could have waited a little bit longer than 3 days. If you read about it, they'll talk about security issues and all this other stuff. I'm not sure I'm buying it. But 3 days later, we'll drop our second bomb on the city of Nagasaki. So this is August 9th. We're going to drop this bomb. It's called Fat Man. That's a colorized version of a bomb similar to that, blowing up on an island in the Pacific. If I showed you the black and white photo, it would look just like the Hiroshima, so I just want to show you a color one of a hydrogen bomb going off. This is one of the most amazing nuclear photos I've ever seen in my life. This is Nagasaki. You can actually see the shock wave coming out. The fact that that camera survived, that's one of the most amazing photos I've ever seen of an actual atomic blast going off. It's just amazing. This is Nagasaki afterwards. Here's some of the horrible injuries. Look at the skin. This arch, this is a Buddhist arch. It survives the Nagasaki destruction there, which is unbelievable that it's amazing the little rando building pieces that make it through. I'm not sure if you remember, but Japan was also hit by a massive tsunami a couple years back, which went through Nagasaki. And the tsunami didn't knock that down either, so it survived an atomic bomb and a tsunami. That's pretty awesome. Now, the wind speeds and the heat at both Hiroshima and Nagasaki are so intense that, when they vaporize you into ash, they would actually slam the ash into surfaces like these stairs here. And you can see this old person, as you can see the cane, and that's their ashes embedded in the stairs that they were walking down. There's also a very famous wall in Nagasaki where there's a woman running, and she has her daughter's hand like this. And it looks like someone just took black paint and did like their shadows on a wall, but it's not. It's their ashes. It's just they vaporized them and the wind just slammed them into the wall, which, gives you an idea of the awesome power of these weapons. Now, after the second bomb, the Japanese are going to surrender. And they're going to end up surrendering on the deck of this ship right here, the USS Missouri. And they're going to do that on September 2nd, 1945. World War II is going to come to an end. I always thought they should have done it on the first. It starts September 1st, 1939. Have it end September 1st, 1945. I think they did the second just to make us history teachers angry. But it ends on the second. Now, this is called VJ Day, Victory in Japan. And here's some of the celebration. This is one of the most famous pictures to come out of the celebration. This is in New York City. Now, interesting thing about this photo, this has been shown many, many, many times. This girl has no clue who that dude is. That's not her boyfriend or her husband. He just walks up and plants a kiss on her in the street. And I wonder how that maneuver would go down today. I don't think that the woman of today is going to be as receptive to that move as what we're seeing here. So, different times, different places, true, but it's an interesting photo to take a look at. Here's people partying in New York. You see the war over. This woman looks super happy. This guy kind of looks like a molester. He's a weird looking dude. There's the party. In New York City, only time ever, all beer and wine on the house. So everyone's drinking, everyone's having a good time. Great big party. I will finish up the war and some of the specifics and all that stuff tomorrow. But I just want to end with only country to successfully win a two-front war. And the other thing is, in a lot of the wars we talk about, we could argue who's the good guys and the bad guys. I don't think World War II, that's a real arguing point. And we're going to be two bad guys, same time, boy. Hopefully we have a prouder moment, but that might be the best. You have a good day, and tomorrow I'll be on, and I'll finish out the war, and we'll do some treaties, Holocaust, and that kind of stuff. Thanks.